Be creative, innovative, passionate. Be excellent, inspiring, driven. Be faithful, disciplined, prepared. At Union University, you will thrive in a Christ-centered community and be equipped for success in your life and career. Begin your journey today. At Union University, be transformed.
Students of the world, gather round. It's time for the World Student Podcast with our host, Mark and Darren.
And welcome once again to the World Student Podcast. Darren Sutherland, your host, my co-host by way of Newark, New Jersey, but today he's acting remotely down in New Orleans, Louisiana. Mark Kopinski. Mark, how are you, my friend?
Good morning, Darren. I'm okay. I came down to New Orleans last night, and I must say it's a new normal in flight. It took me 6 hours to get to New Orleans, one stop in Charlotte, and the plane looked like a emergency room with the amount of personal protective equipment people had on. I'm not sure that I'm too excited about doing a lot of air travel until we get back to something that looks a little bit better than that. But anyway, I'm up and I'm here in a relatively sleepy New Orleans. Let's just say Bourbon Street was not fully open last night.
Wow. Well, let's swing halfway across the globe and go across the international date line, Mark. And let's talk to a friend of ours over in Melbourne, Australia, where it's 9:20 Eastern Standard Time here. So it's probably 9:20 or 10 o'clock at night there. Patrick Kelly. Patrick, how are you doing, my friend?
Good morning, Darren and Mark. Great to be here. And, well, I'm actually based in Singapore, young Darren. So in Melbourne right now, it'll probably be 11:30, and in Singapore, closer to 9:30.
Man alive. But you know what, Mark and Patrick, nowhere else in the world could you get three accents as distinct as our three accents on a podcast at one time. Okay. I'm here in Atlanta. Mark's got that New Jersey, New Yorker accent. And Patrick, you know, you're very distinctly Australian. So, hey, we've got it working so people know we're genuine in what we're talking about today. And what we want to talk to you folks about today is if you're a student in the U.S. and you want to go to school over in Australia, we want to tell you how to do that. And if you're a U.S. recruiter, U.S. admissions rep, and you're looking to find students in Australia in the Far East, Patrick can help you there, and Mark can always fill in the goal. Patrick, give us some of your background before we start the conversation today.
No worries, Darren. So I'm the CEO of Study Choices and founder of Study Choices. We specialize in technology solutions, trying to connect agents with universities. So we help the agents by putting in place an easy-to-use system that allows them to personalize their course selection for their students. And by that, what I mean is, for instance, if you're in Vietnam and you've got a Vietnamese certificate, add your Vietnamese certificate score, add your IELTS score or equivalent English score, and it'll let you know what courses you can select in different countries. Further to that, we help with the application processing and provide partnerships at the back end to give those agents a wider array of choice. So that's what we do, Darren.
Patrick, how does this benefit the student? Tell them real simply how you save them time and energy doing this.
Oh, well, the personalization is a big help. So rather than having an agent give you 15 different courses to choose from and you don't know which one you're going to be accepted into, the idea with the technology is that, you know, you put in some basic information and it'll give you an answer in 60 seconds. So, that's one thing. The second thing it does is it allows you to research the courses and the university itself and have some information about the location, its competencies, the areas of study it focuses on, international number of students that are there, what scholarships may be available. It's got a lot of information.
And
so that's the core benefit.
Give them the name of that app one more time, Patrick.
www.studychoices.com.
Well, Patrick, while you're here today, we're here to talk Australia. And Mark, you know a whole lot about Australia. Tell the folks your experience about getting students from the U.S. to Australia, Mark.
Well, Darren, it's actually one of the most exciting markets in the world right now. We have over 10,000 American students studying in Australia, either on short-term courses, which would be 1 to 3 months, or doing full undergraduate degrees. And Patrick will talk a little bit more about the system there, but the undergrad degrees there are 3 years, which make them very appealing to American students. They actually shave off a year of their undergraduate study. And then there's a Madrid of grad programs that American students also study in, masters, PhDs, specialty programs. And then a lot of American kids go over there to do work internships and get that experience in corporate Australia, if you will. And on the other side of it, we have more than 5,000 Australians coming to our U.S. universities to study, and certainly Patrick can talk a little bit more about that. The exciting piece of that, I think, for recruiters is a lot of the Australian students that come to America want to play NCAA Division III, II, or I athletics. About 30% of that 5,000 students are active participants in intercollegiate sports in the U.S. So Australia, very exciting market, both for students going there and for Australian students coming to the U.S. and other parts of the world.
Patrick, let's make this real simple for those students in the U.S. that are wanting to go to school in Australia. What's step one for them?
Look, step one is understanding well, there's probably 2 steps you want to look at up front, and that is understanding the entry criteria to get into a university or a course. And step 2 is understanding which course do I want to study. And you're going to have to do a little bit more research than you may want to do if you're going to a domestic university in the US. And what I mean there is the course selection is you choose a degree. You choose a business degree, for instance, or an engineering degree or an IT degree. You don't turn up for the first year and try and sample a few of the foundation courses and then select your next 3 years. You've got to choose that up front. So we don't really have that foundation year that maybe the American universities do. So you're probably going to have to do a little bit more research up front, speak to a few people about what it is that they finished with when they finished their studies and what jobs they went into. So that's a fair bit of research required to get that done. And the second part of that is understanding, well, all right, I know I want to study this type of course. What's the requirements to get in? And that's where your SAT comes in place. Now, most of the universities take the SAT, so there's no problems there. So it really is a simple match of what score did you get and what's the minimum requirement for that course. But you need to be on your toes, and you need to be able to use a platform like Study Choices, which will allow you to personalize that result.
You know, Patrick, Mark mentioned athletes from Australia coming to the U.S. and playing Division I, II, and III college sports and NIA sports. What about athletes from the U.S. coming over and participating in Australian sports? Is that an option? Now, I know your sports are a little different down there, cricket, rugby, and things of that nature. But you do have stuff, international football, which is American soccer. Volleyball's a big sport down there. Swimming's a huge sport down there. Tennis, of course. And you've even put people in Major League Baseball up here in the United States. But basketball seems to be one of the king sports down there. Are there students traveling now internationally to play college athletics in Australia?
Look, I think it depends on the sport, but by and large, the university culture in Australia does not lend itself to scholarships for sporting expertise like it does in the US. The US really badges its universities on some of the sporting codes, such as for swimming, for basketball, you have a college team. It's not really like that for universities in Australia. Universities are more focused on academic pursuit than it is sporting pursuit. If you're a keen sports person, you might join the university to play sport, represent the university, but the university doesn't live and die by sport. It lives and dies by academic research.
Great information. Great information.
A little bit different.
Yep. What is the cost for a university or a college over in Australia for a U.S. student right now?
Yeah, it's a good question, Darren. The costs are different in the sense that if you go to the major cities like Sydney and Melbourne, they're going to be a bit more expensive than some of the rest of Australia. There's probably a magnitude of about 30% difference. And right now, the other thing to take note of is the US dollar, Australian dollar divide. Australian dollar's weakened significantly over the last 3 years to the point where you're probably getting a 30 or 35% discount on the cost of your tuition in Australia at the moment. So what that equates to in real terms is in the big cities, it's probably going to cost you, 25 to 30,000 US dollars a year for a 3-year undergraduate. So you're probably looking at 80 to 90,000 US for a 3-year degree, quality education. And in some of the other cities, you're probably more looking close to 25 to 30,000 US per year, which equates to 75 to 80,000 US in tuition fees.
Patrick, you mentioned scholarships. I'm curious, for American kids coming to Australia, are there academic scholarships, or is there any way to reduce that cost based on the program they want to study, or maybe the success of the SAT score, or are they basically paying what's on the tin, as they say?
By and large, you pay what's on the tin. I never heard that one before, but thanks for that cultural
British
learning.
thing. See that, Darren, how I'm able to throw in that global jargon?
That's right,
Well,
man.
if it said tinny,
I'm going to throw in a yellow before it's over with, okay?
in Australia, if you say tinny, that's like a can of beer, and then I know what you're talking about. So if that's the type of tin you're talking about, well, you're talking my language.
Show, Patrick. That's next hour.
You wouldn't believe I forgot the question now. Well, can you repeat that question?
About scholarships.
Oh, scholarships, yeah. Look, they break into two areas. By and large, you pay the price on the tinny. And but they do have, if you are the top of your field in a certain within the SAT or in a specific area of study in postgraduate, there are definitely scholarships to be had. They're just few and far between. So for the top universities, if you are really bright and brilliant, absolutely there's something to be had. If you're going to some of the other states including WA, Western Australia, or South Australia, or Queensland, there's probably more general scholarships to be had, which will help you discount the cost of the course. And I think really now with COVID coming on, and Australia's rebounded quite well actually out of COVID, but I'm sure that universities would be flexible in their pricing at some stage to be able to offer some discounts, if you want to call them scholarships, or I call them discounts, to the tuition fees over the next few months. I think if you're going to inquire, now's a great time to be negotiating hard.
I'm assuming your web platform would have all those resources, and then obviously education advisors, could help American students navigate that just as they do for Australian students coming to the US. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So hop on, do some research, and then make an inquiry. We'll make it easy for you.
Patrick, one last question on Australian universities. How receptive are they to American students and students from other parts of the world, Europe, Asia, India, and the Middle East, Africa? How receptive are they?
Look, amazingly, Australia is a very multicultural society. Being only 200 years old, or just over, we were brought up with immigration from the start. So very diverse cultures. Whether it's all those countries that you mentioned, we've got plenty of them. So our immigration policies support highly skilled individuals who want to come over and make Australia a home. So very supportive and very diverse. More than welcoming to Americans. I mean, look, the big cultural come together is really around sport, English culture. Americans, I know, don't mind having a drink or two, and neither do Australians. You've got a love for the beach as well on some of the coastlines, and so does Australia. So there's a number of things that Australians and Americans can get to know each other around.
No doubt. My daughter spent some time over there a couple of summers ago in a semester in Melbourne. And you know what her biggest complaint was, Patrick, when she came home?
What was that?
They had no Mexican food. It was limited on Mexican food.
There's some things you just never be satisfied with when you've got a home
That's
cooking
right.
solution.
That's
Sounds
right.
like business opportunity for us.
That's it. That it.
One of the other things, sorry, Darren, one of the other things I think it's good to take note of is Australia is an amazingly safe country to spend some time.
Yep.
So our police are excellent. We have a very mature uh, uh, policies around, what the government sets up in terms of enforcement. There's a lack of, less crime than general. Um, People are friendly. It's a well-balanced society in terms of work hard, play hard. So there's a number of things there that an American student or any other country will actually can get involved in and really appreciate what Australians are and who they are.
Nice, nice. Now let's talk about Australian students, Patrick, who want to come to the U.S. And this segment is brought to us by our friends at Union University. Union is highly ranked year after year as one of the nation's top Christian universities. Live, thrive, succeed. Begin your journey today with Union University. You can visit them at uu.edu and get that information. Our good friend Dan Griffith, we'll have him on before long. But admissions reps from all over the U.S. are looking for students from Australia to come to their school, whether it be Union University in Jackson, Tennessee, or a multitude of other places. What is the first step they need to do, Patrick, in recruitment of those students? Because the easy thing they've got is, number one, they speak English in Australia. That's the primary language. It's not like going to Europe where you've got a kid from Norway or a kid from France or a kid from Czechoslovakia that's got to learn the language or maybe not have a great understanding of English as their second language. English is their first language. And although they may have a different accent like you and I do, we can communicate readily fast. Okay, there may be a few words like what'd y'all say a while ago, teeny? Was that the word y'all used?
Teeny,
I don't even know.
Teeny, Tinnie, not a teeny,
teeny, whatever it is, okay? But what we're saying is that the Australian students pretty much speak the King's. They may not speak the King's English because I don't even speak the King's English. I speak Southern broken English. But anyway, the communication problem is not there. What does these U.S. schools need to do for these Australians to recruit these Australian students, Patrick?
Well, I think you play up some of the similarities and some of the aspirations. So I'm sure, as Marcus, I think, has already mentioned, that there's plenty of students in Australia who actually want to win at their sport and are enthusiasts in a certain sport. And you know what? Some of the leading practitioners of that sport happen to be in the US, and they're very keen to learn from the best. So some of those sports, whether it's basketball as an example, they want to get over there and play against the best competition in the world. Can they do that through university? Absolutely. Do you have scholarships? Your scholarship program is probably second to none in the world. So any Australian who has that aspiration would love that. So maybe those universities with that sporting culture will actually put that up first and foremost as some of the things that can be done over in the US. Because I think, to be frank with you, I think Australians are a bit naive or a bit uneducated about those benefits that the US universities offer.
No, I was just going to add, I mean, certainly Patrick's platform is super helpful, not only to students, but also recruiters, whether you're at Union or another school in the States. And of course, the education agency industry is mature and extremely useful for U.S. universities that are working either online, or if they're able to go to Australia, they can work directly with these education agencies. We talked about agents, in other segments of this show, and how valuable they can be to provide information to parents and students, and then help the admissions officers at these schools, navigate schools in Australia. I'm talking about high schools and academic records, and really all the information coming from, students in Australia. Not to mention the fact that it's not just Australians coming out of Australia. I mean, Patrick mentioned how diverse a culture it is. You have kids from all over the world studying at high schools and then at universities in Australia, that find their way to the U.S., whether they're from Singapore or Hong Kong or Thailand or Vietnam or what have you. And, I think the market, I said earlier, we have, over 5,000 Australian born citizens coming over to the US to study, but then you add in all the multinationals there, and you're talking about 16, 17,000 students coming from that part of the world to study undergraduate or graduate programs in the US. And I think Patrick and his services are really helpful for American recruiters that make the journey. It's a long trip to Australia. You got to spend a few weeks there once you get there to really get anything done. But having a strategy and plan before you go, and knowing where to be in terms of the cities and the schools is extremely important. I think, Patrick, your daughter is at an international school in Australia, or maybe she's in Singapore now. I'm not sure which, but that's those.
Yeah, Singapore American School.
Sorry?
The Singapore American School.
There you go. So
which is an
that's
American curriculum. Yeah.
That's a school that's exporting, probably 95% of their students to the US, Canada, UK, other parts of the world, correct?
The US, yeah, absolutely.
But Patrick, my next question was on culture, and this is for those U.S. admissions reps. What is the culture like in Australia? In America, we've got private schools, we've got public schools, and we've got different standings of public schools, and then we've got boarding schools. How is it made up? I mean, you mentioned there in Singapore, the Singapore American School, but how is it in Australia broken down? Is it broken down private, public, boarding? How is it broken down there?
Yeah, you have private schools and public schools. So a private school is usually an expensive school that focuses on academic and sporting prowess or cultural prowess. The fees are quite substantial. But the beauty of Australia is we believe education has a right for every student. And it shouldn't matter whether you're rich or poor or in between. You should be able to get a good quality education. And the beauty of Australia is it has that approach to its education system. So even if you're going into a public school, by and large, the public school is usually reasonably good. Our philosophy is around saying, the harder you work, if you want to get ahead, work hard, and there's an opportunity for you. And we want to be the land of opportunity. So the school system is, by and large, quite good across the board.
Is there a national governing system for the schools? Like here, we've got the Department of Education that kind of oversees, but then you've got standardized, things like SACs and folks like that. Is there a standard over in Australia that kind of oversees everything?
Despite us being a tenth of the size of your country, we have a decentralized model where we have a Department of Education for each state. So it's run by the states to be straight. So Department of Education in New South Wales, the Department of Education in Victoria, etc. So it's state run.
So where would a recruiter start if he wanted to recruit Australian students to come to his school? And let's not talk about sports because that's easy. We can see those guys via tape and Hulu and everything else. Where would someone recruit a student that said has an interest in engineering and they want to come to the States? Where should that admissions rep start?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that they can do. Rather than, it's a little bit different to maybe recruiting in parts like Asia where there's lots of academic fairs.
Right.
There's probably less fairs in Australia. Australia doesn't go to fairs to get information about studying abroad because by and large, a good chunk of Australians stay domestic. But I think having a network of schools or agents to work with is the way to approach it, and probably prioritizing the schools in terms of socioeconomic prowess. So, as you mentioned, the private schools, from a cost perspective, are probably socioeconomic in the high end of the socioeconomic side of things. So that would be one thing. Otherwise, you work with agents in Australia who may be able to support you in that area.
Nice.
I did want to say one thing, Darren, though.
Go ahead.
Just one of your previous questions around what is it the Australians would look for in the US. One of the big things that's unaware of, the university system in the US has a big thing around its alumni.
Mhm.
And it's such a significant thing that's not well known in Australia, because the alumni associations in Australia at universities are nowhere near the skill and the networking solutions that the US provide. And I know parents in Australia would really value what the alumni of universities can do for their kids post study. And that's something I'm not sure if you plan to talk about it here, but the Americans are first class at this. They help their own to solve networking challenges, job challenges. It's that alumni groups that you have in the US is priceless. Actually, it's not the same in Australia. Um, the alumni, there is an alumni, but it doesn't work like the US support alumni in the US.
To piggyback off of that, are the number of religious-based schools we have in the U.S. And I'm curious if Australia is set up in a similar fashion, where you have Christian, non-Christian, secondary schools, universities, that kind of thing. Because a lot of the clients I work with in the U.S. Are Christian-based schools, and they're looking to recruit like-minded families and students to their institutions. How plentiful is that? And I think that also, Christian schools and their ability to work with students after they graduate, the whole point of alumni that you're talking about is very, very strong in these religious-based schools in the U.S. I'm just curious what that looks like in Australia.
Look, we at the high school level, no, so not university, but high school level, we have Catholic colleges, Anglican colleges, etc., which you're quite right around the religion of the students. So that's plentiful in Australia. Where it's a little bit different is when you get to university level. We only have 40 odd universities, right? So it's not like we have a university for a religion. We do have someone called the Australian Catholic University, but by and large, I think it's by name, not by religion if you attend. So a little bit different, I guess. I think there's a definite need. So that's one angle for the religious universities in America to tap into the religious schools in Australia, because actually the Australian universities don't really cater to religion.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I think when you're trying to find markets within markets, in a school like our sponsor, Union, I mean, they're a traditional Baptist institution. You don't have to be Baptist necessarily to go to school there, but their history, their heritage, their alumni that you were talking about, all come from a faith-based platform. And they're looking for students around the world that buy into that, if you know what I mean. And that doesn't necessarily mean having to go to a service every Sunday or every day of the week or what have you, but it's a way of living your life. And this is important to these institutions, and I'm assuming young people in Australia that are looking to go to a community that is welcoming and supporting and looking to look after them, as you were pointing out, once they graduate and go out and try to build a career for themselves.
I think you make a really good point there, Mark. I would say that Australian universities don't cater to that segment.
Patrick, before we get out of here, one last question, because we're under time, and I know thank you for working with us today and telling us all about the Australian student. But what would you say to that parent in Australia whose son or daughter comes to them and says to them, hey, I want to go to school in the U.S. What do I need to do? What would you say to them today? Just research the school you want to attend, find a great school, find a great recruiter, and find a school, use your app. How could that be of service?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first step is understanding the university selection process, which is going to be different to Australia. So understanding, if you've studied in Australia and you've got a high school score from a local Australian or New South Wales academic, score, like an ATAR score, how does that convert to the US? which universities will accept the tests that you've done, or do you have to go and do an SAT or an ACT? Or thirdly, can you do an interview and them to look at your interview results rather than an academic score? So understand the selection process is one thing. The second thing is, whereabouts on America's a very large, 52 states or something, haven't you?
Yep.
Yeah, 52 states, so a very large,
50
diverse.
states. 50 states.
All right. I've just added two. Let me make
I
them
know
up.
it. Yeah, I just gave us the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. Here we go.
Make it Jamaica,
Jamaica,
man.
trying to be a state too.
So very diverse region. So it may be that you prefer skiing, or you prefer the beach, or you're going to have an element of lifestyle, or maybe it's an academic prowess. Maybe one of the colleges in America is awesome at basketball, or is awesome at medicine. Yeah, so it might be the top medical university. So understand where you want to live, understand what it is you're trying to achieve from a study perspective, and then get onto a platform like Study Choices and do some search and do some research. That's the focus.
And make sure you always check out our sponsor, Union University. You can check them out at uu.edu. uu.edu. Union University. Union is highly ranked year after year as one of the nation's top Christian universities. Live, thrive, succeed. Begin your journey today with Union University. Dan Griffith and our friends up there. Patrick, we could go for another hour, but we know you've got to get to bed. It's nighttime over there. Mark and I have got to get to work and continue our day on what we've got going on. Real quickly, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, how would they reach out to you, or how do they find your app and your information, or find out information on Australia?
Yeah, just go to www.studychoices.com and you'll be able to contact me from there.
There we go. Mark, great guest today. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk to those people down under, as they say. Isn't that how it goes, Patrick? Down under?
Down under with a tinny. Remember that.
Hey, let me ask you a few cultural questions here before we get out. We just got just a second. In Atlanta, if I want a drink, carbonated beverage like a Coke or a Pepsi or a Sprite or a Dr. Pepper, all I simply say is, I want a Coke, and they say, what kind of Coke do you want? Okay. Or what kind of Coke would you like to have? And we'll say a Sprite, a Dr. Pepper, because everything is a Coke in Atlanta. Of course, we're the hometown of Coke, so it should be that way. It's a great brand. If I was in Australia, what do I say when I want a carbonated beverage? Do I want a soda pop? Do I want a pop?
Soft drink.
What do I want? A soft drink. Nice.
But they're all called soft drinks.
All called soft drinks.
Yeah.
And see, Mark, up there where you're at in Newark, New Jersey, it's a soda pop, right? Or is it pop?
I'm from the upper Midwest, so we used to say pop. But when I went out to school in the East and I said pop, all the students looked at me like I was crazy. So I think soda is probably the word here.
So can I ask, what is soft drink? Where did they ever get that from? A soft drink.
Well, if you drink whiskey
what's a hard
all the
drink?
time and you go to pop, that's a soft drink.
There you go. There you go.
Right. Learn something every day.
All right, guys. We appreciate it. Thank you for listening once again to the World Student Podcast, brought to you by our friends at Union University. Check them out. uu.edu. Real easy to remember. uu.edu. Online. And Mark, it's been good. We'll talk to you next week, my friend. Patrick, thanks for being a guest. We'll talk to you soon. You've been listening to World Student Podcast. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the World Student Podcast. For more information on how you can be a part of this podcast and information on international student recruitment, email us at worldstudentpodcast@gmail.com. And please leave a remark in the remarks section. This podcast was a production of BG Podcast Network. Jonathan Giles, producer. Jacob Sutherland, director.
Be creative, innovative, passionate. Be excellent, inspiring, driven. Be faithful, disciplined, prepared. At Union University, you will thrive in a Christ-centered community and be equipped for success in your life and career. Begin your journey today. At Union University, Be transformed.